Good afternoon and welcome to the October 22nd Oklahoma City Planning Commission meeting. If you have pagers or cell phones, we would ask you that you would either turn those off or silence them now. If you are not the applicant and you have come to address us on a case today, there are sign-up sheets on the table outside the chambers. And if you would complete the form, we'd be happy to hear you when we hear the case. And the first item of business, Commissioners, is approval of the October 8th minutes.
Move approval. Second motion.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Cast your votes. Minutes are approved. Okay. They're approved. And continuance requests.
We have several continuance requests that I'm going to read. Item A on the agenda is uncontested request for continuance. Item B28, which is C6763 to defer to November 12th. Item B29, which is PC 10432, defer to November 12th. Item B30, which is C6539 to defer to November 12th. Item B31 for PUD 1597, November 12th. Item B32, which is DA 24408, defer that to November 12th. And item B33, which is PC 10425, to defer that to December 10th.
Is there anyone here today who came to speak to us on items 28 through 33 on our agenda?
Move the uncontested continuance.
We have a motion and a second to approve the uncontested continuances. Cast your votes. And those are approved. Bob, you're voting? Okay.
We also have 10 new requests for continuance that I will read off for item B8, which is CPA 2015-1 to defer to November 12th. Item B9 for PC 10429, defer to November 12th. Item B10 for PUD 1594, defer to November 12th. Item B11 for C6748, defer to November 12th. Item B13 for PC 10431, defer that to January 28th. Item B14 for PUD 1599, defer to January 28th. Item B15 for C6756, defer that to January 28th. Item B19 for PUD 1598, defer that to November 12th. Item B21 for CE 919, defer to November 12th. And item B27 for PV 096, defer to November 12th.
Did anyone come today to address us on any of the cases just read? I see Beth Rutledge has signed up for agenda item 15, which is proposed to be continued. Is she here? It's proposed to be continued. Do you have an issue with that? Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Nick?
Mr. Chairman, item 19 is a application on a PUD that was negotiated not too long ago, very tightly negotiated. It's now for a change. It's being continued. I have no problem with the continuance, but I don't see the applicant here, but I would encourage them to stick with their original PUD. And with that, I'd move the additional continuances.
We have a motion and a second to approve the additional continuances. Cast your votes. Those are approved. Are there any continuance requests from the public today? Hearing none, we'll go to the consent docket.
Okay.
Do commissioners get to make a request for continuance?
I guess you may. You can be part of the public.
And I had a question about item number 22. It indicates that a traffic impact analysis is required for this item. And I just wondered, rather than go through the whole process of hearing it and then deciding that we were going to have to continue it because a traffic impact analysis is required, whether we could find out whether that's been submitted or in the meantime, or whether they're going to continue it in order to submit that, or what.
Aubrey and the applicant, both of you want to comment?
Is the applicant here?
Yes.
The applicant's on his way. Tim Johnson on behalf of the applicant. We saw that TE as well. We did talk to Randy Entz, and we did submit preliminary numbers early on and basically requested a waiver simply because the development in this area is so far down the road. It just doesn't make any sense, especially with the impending fees that are being proposed for both residential and commercial. It just doesn't make any sense to do an analysis that won't prove anything except for, when there's...
And I don't have a problem with the position one way or the other. I just wanted to know as a procedural matter, if we were going to require it and it was going to have to be continued for that purpose, do we know whether we're going to require it or not? Is there somebody here who can tell us?
Well, Randy is not here. JJ, do you know if Randy said that that would be able to be waived?
No, he said it did tip the scale that would require an analysis.
He thinks it will?
Yes.
Well, so do you want to take a continuance, or do you want to wait for the applicant?
No, we'll wait for the applicant.
Okay.
I know specifically he does not want to provide a traffic impact study because of the length of time to get any development in the area up to a level that will require any traffic improvements.
Okay, well, we'll hear it in order, I guess.
Okay. We're now ready for the consent docket.
All right, there are 4 items on the consent docket, which I will read. Item 1 is for C-6743, the final plat of Traditions Business Center. Item 2 is for C-6764, the final plat of Rockwell Heights Industrial Park. Item 3 is for C-6767, the final plat of Valencia Commercial, Section 2. And item 4 is C-6760, the final plat of Cedar Creek Professional Park.
Anyone come today to talk to us about items 1 through 4 on the consent docket?
Move the consent docket.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent docket. Cast your votes. And that's approved.
Under items requiring separate vote, item 5 is SPUD 851 to rezone 4401 Southeast 118th Street from C3 and AA to SPUD 851.
Is the applicant here? Give us your name and address, please.
I'm actually Kerry Vogt. I'm wanting to buy this property from Steve, and I'm the one who's actually the applicant, you could say.
And your address?
My address is 1205 Southeast 93rd Street.
Okay, thank you. Tell us what you plan here.
I just plan on a small business, personal home business of a small light manufacturing machine shop.
Okay.
I'd like to put my house next to it also. The plan looks great. The only thing I'd like to change is square footage of the house from a minimum of 2,100 to just up it to 3,000 for the max square footage of the house.
I don't think the size of the house would be of our concern, so
Okay.
you can do whatever you want there.
Okay?
I had a question about this. It indicates that the commercial part of it, or the manufacturing part of it, is actually going to be constructed first. And although I don't have any problem at all with the idea of it being used for both things, I think it's sort of a different application if what is going to get built is the manufacturing part of it, and that's all. So I wonder if we have any way of knowing or guaranteeing, or I don't know exactly what I want to say about that, that both things are going to happen.
You know, we're going to buy the property from, and this is where, right now I'm in a warehouse district and tired of paying rent, and I'd like to move my house and my kids there. Right now we're in a residential area on about a quarter-acre lot, and the property is mainly bought to where I can put my business and walk next door to my kids when I go for it. That's the whole reason of the property.
What kind of business do you have?
I do small oil field parts, manufacturing of small parts on lathes. And
Okay, the drawing that's on here now, the 5,000 square feet, is that your building?
Yes, sir.
And what do you propose for a building?
Just metal building, bolt together metal building. It'll look like all the barns in the same area.
And then
If you can look at-
I guess that's your house back at the back, 2,100 square
Yes.
feet? And you're proposing, what are you proposing there?
Well, we're just asking for a max of, be able to build a max of 3,000 square feet. It's going to be a brick home per regulations in this document.
On this drawing, you're showing basically a square on the, do we have page 5 on there? You kind of show a panhandle off of that. What's the difference there?
The panhandle is actually how the property sits as of right now. Steve has changed the property, and the only difference is, if you can look at a Google Maps or a site map, do you have a picture of that in yours? Yeah. You have this picture here?
No, yeah, that picture, well, that does, the one I was thinking about was
Okay.
the one,
If you look at that, the house that's in front of the panhandle, that gentleman basically just took the panhandle. He owns both properties, and he's put that into his property and remade the property where it looks like that now. So when the purchase is actually done, I'll be purchasing the property looking like that. He's cut the panhandle off is what he's done.
no,
The property will be the exact same size, same square footage. It's not getting smaller. He's actually widened that boundary closer towards his house.
have you read all the conditions for approval?
Yes.
Do you agree with all of them?
Yes. My building, my house will look like everything in that area. There's nothing no different than what I'm asking for.
If the panhandle is actually going to go with the house that's south of it,
Yes, sir.
your motion should probably be to approve and delete the panhandle from this application. Or it will just be a small piece of industrial back behind that person's house.
Yeah, I hate to ask you to continue this, but I'd like to know a little bit more about what you're going to put there. I know that, I know what's along Sunny Lane. But I'd like to know a little bit more about the building that you're going to put there. And I'd like to know a little bit more about the house that you're going to put there. And, if you can do that in a couple of weeks, I would ask you to do that and come back. I don't really have a problem with it, but I think we need to know a little bit more detail on what you're going to build.
Okay.
Okay?
May I ask for what reasons, as in, like, what kind of detail would you like?
I just want to see.
This is my very first time
Yeah.
ever
Do
doing
you
it.
do you have somebody are you going to build the building yourself?
I will probably contract some of it out, but basically, yeah.
Okay, have your contractor give us a elevation and a floor plan and stuff like that. I would like to see that. I would like to see that on your house as well. I don't mean a set of plans, and I know that, you're going to have to meet code and all that stuff. But I'd like to know a little bit more about what you're going to put there. And the next thing, the line that runs north and south there, is that some kind of an easement?
Oh, on the edge of that property?
Along the front, goes up to the second.
That's the line between the current C3 zoning that fronts Sunny Lane and the AA zoning on the rest of the property.
Oh, okay, I see, yeah, okay. Would you have a problem with that, would you continuing it for 2 weeks?
That'll be fine.
Okay?
Yes, sir.
That's what I'm going to recommend.
I think part of what Mr. Allen is asking is he wants to know what's going to front on Sunny Lane, what's going to actually
That's
face
right.
people in traffic as they go north and south on Sunny Lane, because you're you're moving essentially a manufacturing building, and you're coming north off the hard corner
No.
and closer to residential. So-
You say manufacturing, but this is literally, like right now, I have nothing outside. And where I'm at right now, there's no site. It looks like a barn, and it's going to look like a barn like everybody else's. I do not want to change the view of the area at all. I just would like to work where my house is too in the future.
Yeah.
I got a Google map here that I circled of multiple buildings in that area that looks the same. And everybody has barns in that area that looks identical.
I understand. I know that area pretty well, so, but I still would like for you to present us some elevations and so on and so forth of the building and maybe your house as well, okay?
Okay.
And what would be the next, what? November the 12th, would that work?
Okay.
Yeah,
I'll see what I can
you're sort of flipping what we usually see. We usually see the house on the front of the property and the barn behind, and you're doing the reverse. So the question is just,
And mine's because I wouldn't want to build the house right next to the main road. I mean, either way, I'd be off from the property. So,
I'm just telling you why there's a question about what we're going to see.
yes, sir.
That's all.
All right.
I think I might recommend that we revise the map to reflect, this map
Yeah,
needs to reflect what we're seeing right here.
yeah.
Because
that's what
if this is what you want, I think that needs to be reflected, Craig, JJ, on this map as well. Staff can assist you with that.
Okay.
Okay, do we have a motion and a second?
Oh, second, sorry.
To continue it,
Second.
okay?
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second to continue item 5 to November 12th. Cast your votes, and let's continue. Thank you very much.
Item 6 is SPUD 852 to rezone 4,000 North Lindsay Avenue from PUD 51 to SPUD 852.
Mr. Chairman, Dennis Box. I'm here with Ms. Lewis. She is the CEO of A New Leash on Life. They'll be the occupants of this building. They're presently along the interstate down south, and ODOT has taken a building that they were leasing, and so this is the location that they have found. I know at least one member on your commission is very familiar with this based on his pro bono activities with his dog. So Mr. Gales has been involved in this organization. Ms. Lewis is here to talk about it. The staff report is positive, and we can agree to the TEs, so we're here to answer your questions if you have any.
Mr. Box, just very clearly, there will be no boarding in this facility, is that correct?
That is correct.
It's just using it for the training of service dogs and so forth, right?
That is correct.
And you agree with all of the TEs?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Dennis, what are the operating hours? Will it just be normal daytime hours, or what?
I'm going to let Ms. Lewis tell you a little bit about their activities, and I want to know about the hours, too, if you can tell them your name.
Give us your name and address, please.
Barbara Lewis. Currently, we're at 7949 South I-35 Service Road.
Thank you.
Most of our activities, well, during the daytime, we train service dogs for people with disabilities. We train therapy dogs, and those classes are during the day, during the week. We are open 7 days a week. Our hours during the Monday through Friday are 9:30 till 6. And Saturday is 10 until 4, and then we have training classes on Sunday afternoon from 10 until 5. We operate really as a community center for the pet-owning public because our goal is to encourage people to really build a relationship with their pets and to help them be able to have activities available that they can participate with their family and their pets. And so we have a lot of nonprofit animal-related groups that use our facility for various dog sports, training activities. We give free workshops for the public on how to better take care of their pet, vaccination clinics. Some of the nonprofit organizations do fundraisers there. And all those activities, basically, those types of activities are during the evening and on Saturday. So during the day, during the week, it's basically training in our business. So we're open a lot.
Okay, thank you. No one signed up, Nick?
Mr. Chairman, I've got a little bit of a history with these folks. When I was looking for training for my dog to be a therapy dog, I started investigating different places. There's places you can send them $50 and they'll send you a certificate and like that. Stumbled on New Leash on Life because I found them and I looked at the board of directors and I noticed that one of my friends, local artist Greg Burns, who had a service dog, was a board member. So I called him and inquired about this. Told me, yeah, they were legit and all that. Going from there, I actually took my dog and that's where she received her therapy training. I can tell you, great folks, great organization, and the old NIMBY deal, I wouldn't care if this deal was in my backyard.
No one has signed up, Commissioners.
Any other questions? I move for adoption.
We have a motion and a second to approve item 6. Cast your votes. And it's approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Item 7 is SPUD 853 to rezone 3500 North Lindsay Avenue from R1 to SPUD 853.
Your name and address, please.
Scott Randall, Oklahoma City Public Schools, 900 North Klein.
Thank you. And briefly, you're taking an unused building and making it an enrollment center, is that correct?
Yes, we are proposing in our request that we take Dewey Elementary School. It's an elementary school in name only. It's currently not used for that purpose. We do not have a need for classrooms in that section demographically as far as to occupy that as a school building. So what we are requesting is the authorization to convert that into a student enrollment center that will, basically the focus will still be very much on serving the students and families of Oklahoma City. So if you're moving into Oklahoma City, let's say you have 3 kids that attend an elementary school, middle school, and a high school, you could easily wind up going to those 3 different schools for enrollment purposes. If you have any type of testing that needs to be done, whether it be economically disadvantaged, ELL, or other testing that may need to occur as far as your students, you could wind up coming down to our central office at 900 North Klein for that testing to occur. So what we're looking to do is really make that a more effective and efficient operation for families as they're coming to Oklahoma City. And to be able to do that, everything that we just discussed, instead of visiting 5 or 6 different or 7 locations to be able to get your students enrolled, is to be able to do that in one center. And so, again, the focus will very much still be on serving the students of Oklahoma City and their families.
Will you be doing any new construction on the site, or?
Not any new construction, and I would temper that a little bit. We are looking at putting in an elevator to make the building ADA compliant, so we're hoping to do that on the interior. It may actually be on the exterior, and then we would remodel, looking at remodeling the southeast corner of that as far as the entrance is concerned, and making that a more recognizable entrance in terms of serving, again, students and families.
Have you read the staff report and the TEs, the technical evaluations at the back of the report?
Yes.
You're in agreement with those?
Yes.
Okay. I assume if there's any new construction or building permits pulled, they'll have to comply with landscaping also, JJ, or not? Okay. Just curious. Again, no one has signed up.
Mr. Chairman, I think this is an excellent opportunity for Oklahoma City Public Schools to really find a use for one of the unused facilities, and certainly in Ward 7 we have several unused schools, and this is just really a perfect way of finding use for facilities. Bus line accessible, parking is going to be added, I think, and it just works very well for that facility. With that in mind, I move for adoption.
We have a motion and a second to approve item 7. Cast your votes. And it's approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Items 8, 9, 10, and 11 were continued. Item 12 is CPA 2015-2. It's an application for a comprehensive plan amendment, changing the land use plan map in the area of Northwest 164th and west of County Line Road from urban reserve land use typology to urban low intensity.
Is the applicant here?
David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. I believe the staff is going to put on, I may be wrong. Okay.
Okay.
So Jeff Butler with the Planning Department can walk us through the process for what staff evaluates when we receive a comprehensive plan amendment request.
Okay, so this is located in the northwest area, 164th and County Line Road. Companion items are the rezone from AA to R1 and also the preliminary plat. The location is right there in the red box up far north of the turnpike. Here's a zoomed-in shot. So the let's see if the red area there is the subject property. The proposal is to develop that as well as the quarter section to the south. The quarter section to the south is already designated as urban low intensity, or UL for short. The part to the north, which is from the quarter section line to a creek that runs just north of that, has an urban reserve overlay. So we anticipate that it would be urbanized at some point. Just so happens that the proposal is for sooner rather than later. So the purpose of the urban reserve is to just maintain land in a condition so that it's ready for urbanization, like I said, at some point in the future. And the intent is so that we can maintain long-term efficiency of service provision, both in the short and long term. So again, it's proposed that we that be removed, that layer, and that it be designated as just simply urban low. And urban low applies to, it's kind of a general designation that applies to areas of the city that are more low density and suburban in character. So for the development that's on the periphery and development that's changing over from greenfield to urbanized development. The reason that it is urban reserve, it did not have immediate access to water service when we did the analysis for Plan OKC. And in addition to that, the fire service is not ideal. Doesn't meet the urban level of service designated in the plan, and I'll talk about that more in a second. So you can kind of see there that there's a subdivision. As I said, the proposed subdivision takes up that whole quarter section, as well as the area in the red, and there's a water line right there on 150th, that will be extended up through the subdivision and to the subject area. So when this was, again, when it was considered, as all the land in the city was considered for some kind of designation for Plan OKC, the water line wasn't there. It's quite a ways away, and so it was not designated at that time, a few months ago. Sewer service exists right next to the creek that's just to the north of the subject area, so that's not an issue. I mentioned that the urban response time, it's not within the urban response time for the fire service, and this was the only reason that really gave us pause in considering this. This area was designated as urban low, the area to the east and the area immediately to the south. Even though it's in this area of less desirable fire service, there is quite a bit of land that's already zoned for urban densities in that area. So we felt the city had kind of already committed to serving that area. Get this done. So as far as compatibility goes, because everything around it is not developed, there really are no compatibility issues as yet. The transportation, the arterials surrounding it are minor arterials. They have capacity. So the recommendation is to approve the request, remove the urban reserve layer, which would leave the urban low intensity designation. Any questions?
Commissioners?
I've got a couple of
questions. Thank you for explaining why the staff and the department would approve the application, because, as you well know, the comprehensive plan isn't even cold yet. It's just been done, and then out of the box comes an amendment. For the first time, I realized what our amendment, or what the plan, the way it's composed, what it does. If we have this to the east that we approved 6 months ago, that we extended water, sewer, fire, police, et cetera, to this one, and now we have this application that's going to be tacking into what was approved 6 months ago, then tomorrow, here's the third application. They'll tap into this and say, wait a minute, I can do this. I'm not in favor of it at all. I think what we do, we let this thing fester and sit for a while and see how it works, because one of the significant issues of your presentation was the fire department. It can't service this area like they want to. There was no mention about police. And the only recollection that I have about the police department was a meeting that we had with some committee prior to a planning commission meeting, and the police guy said, there's 80 square miles up there, and we have 2 patrol cars. I mean, in other words, the adequacy of police protection out in this part of the world, I don't know if it's sustainable, but there's nothing mentioned about police in here. There is fire, and the fire guys say, that's a problem. So unless every single one of those elements that would be involved in amending the plan is in place, I'm not in favor of amending it. That's my spin on this thing, because...
I had kind of a similar reaction initially to this, and I'm not sure I'm quite there yet, but on the one hand, I think what we've heard the staff tell us on these is that the process of actually adopting the plan and identifying these areas was such, or on a timeline, that, we knew, or they knew, that there would be these things, that these little pieces that were designated for urban reserve, but that in the meantime, would become appropriate even before the plan was approved. The concern I have about this particular application is that it does, the other piece of that is, the portion of this that's outside the floodplain, that's what it is, and the creek and all of that, is so small. I mean, it's really only about half of the area that they're seeking to take out of the reserve. And it seems to provide a pretty substantial and natural barrier to that domino effect. The concern that I have about this application, or the way this application is being presented to us, is that it seems to be more of a, I don't know if half-hearted is quite the right word, but it's sort of like, well, we might as well approve it. And that's not the approach that I would choose to take to amendments to the plan. We might as well. I mean, if there is not some compelling reason to do it, then I don't see why we should.
If I may, I do think there are some... Oh.
Just a minute, please. I'd like to speak. If this commission will recall, we had meetings to go over documents and maps on what should be and what should not be an urban reserve. During those meetings, on 2 occasions, I pointed out that this very area should not be urban reserve because it was served and was developing quickly. I was assured in those meetings the map would be changed. I had a subsequent meeting with 2 staff members in their office, and I was assured the map would be changed. The map never was changed. Now we're sitting here with a plan amendment. Bob's making points the G, it shouldn't be. I agree, it shouldn't be. We shouldn't be entertaining a plan amendment because the plan shouldn't be amended. It should have never been drawn this way in the first place. We knew it at the time. I pointed it out at the time. I had assurances it would happen, and it didn't.
Just like to chime in on that. And I'm not sure what happened, Nick, with those conversations, if this was a portion of that we were looking at. I know that in our analysis, this was one of the areas where we knew that service provision was very close to the thresholds that we had to draw for making a distinction between urban low intensity and urban reserve areas. We've always said from the beginning of time that the purpose of the comprehensive plan designating urban reserve areas is that we wanted to provide growth management so that we could grow contiguously, so that we grow in a more efficient manner. The subdivision, the majority of this subdivision that's already in the urban low intensity area is served. It will receive fire response time, even though the fire response time is low. It is directly across the street from the city of Edmond, who we have service provisions for emergency response. So we already know that we have committed to developing the majority of this subdivision. This is extending up to the creek that Janice mentioned, so that's why the line of the urban reserve is drawn in that funky little way. So that really beyond that, it would be incredibly difficult to extend water and sewer past that. So we felt that this boundary, to extend the subdivision a few more lots, seemed completely appropriate in the service levels to what was happening
what we're
adjacent
seeing
to it.
here, Aubrey, we're seeing an application before us with a staff recommendation for adoption for all the reasons you just cited. And yet you're seeing commission members saying, oh no, staff, you're wrong. It says, the plan says this, and bang, we're sticking to it. Well, the plan shouldn't say this in this case, and we knew it at the time. That's my point.
If I could, I think, look, I wasn't involved in the conversations with the map. I'm not necessarily arguing that particular point. But what I think with the plan is that we will always have edge conditions. There will always be these requests. It's a living document that is meant to, to an extent, it's a snapshot with our best estimate about where we think things are going. But we're going to have these edge conditions that are going to exist throughout all the areas. Maybe not, this is a rural residential. But I guess my point with respect of the plan is to an extent, I agree with Bob, and then Nick's point is certainly well made. But I think we need to be prepared in our dealing with the plan to understand that these are going to come back. This won't be the only one we have in the next 10 years. It probably won't be the only one we have this year. So let's, think about it. We made our best estimate. We did a good job, heck of a job. But let's just deal with these as they come up and deal with them as they come, because they're going to come.
Well, and I would say that in this particular case, separate and apart from Nick's point, which is certainly a much stronger point than we might as well, this case is even more than just perhaps one that you could classify as they're going to come up. And I think this is one that probably fell into that category of being anticipated, something that was foreseen to come up.
Well, I think if we think about the last plan we had, how many times was it amended over 30 or 40 years? I mean, I can't count the number of times while I've been on the commission. And I think we're going to see amendment requests to this plan probably pretty regularly. It's just going to happen that way. I mean, it's difficult to draw these boundaries, and when they're drawn, they're just subject to somebody's judgment, and they're clearly subjective when they're done. And so we have to deal with the issues as they come up and as development needs are presented. Any other discussion, Commissioners? A motion? We have a motion and a second to approve item 12. Cast your votes. And it's approved.
Items 13, 14, and 15 were continued. Item 16 is C 6755, a preliminary plat of the dwellings at Sosa located east of Francis and north of Northwest 6th Street, and also requesting a variance for Section 5.2.2 of the subdivision regulations.
Do you have anything you want to say first?
Before David does his presentation, I might want to offer a point of clarification. I know there have been some questions about the item of the variance to the subdivision regulations. I just wanted to offer a little bit of a description before we start our discussion about that, in that this section of the subdivision regulations is specific to the way that a plat is drawn and the lot configuration. This section of the subdivision regulations requires all lots on a corner, on an intersection, to clip that corner at a 25-degree angle. And that is to accommodate a site triangle requirement that is listed elsewhere in the code. So in downtown, where most of the platting was done a long time ago, you'll see that the block pattern on this map shows that all of those lots are drawn as full section lots. It's pretty unusual for us to see a plat come in downtown where that subdivision regulation would then need to be applied. So I just wanted to give a little background and why that variance is being requested to clip the corner back to meet that. In downtown zoning districts, we also require buildings to be set up to the property line, and the site distance triangles are often waived as long as there's an analysis done by the Public Works Department to determine that site distance is going to be met at the intersection. So if there's any questions, too, about site distance triangles or whether or not the variance was necessary, I hope that clarifies it, and that it is how the lot is drawn on the plat with either a clipped corner or a full corner.
David.
David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. This is a case that came before the commission 2 weeks ago, you might remember, and I think really the only issue to address is the site triangle issue. Ms. Hammond did a good job explaining what that issue is. I do see Mr. Winger, the Public Works Director, is here today if there are any questions. Also with me are the developers, Mr. Lee and Ms. Baker. And if you think about, and Mr. Johnson, the engineer, if you think about why we would want a site triangle, it deals with site distance. It deals with safety issues. Well, here we're at an intersection that has an exceptionally large right-of-way. Mr. Johnson superimposed where these buildings will be at this intersection. As you can see, not only do we have 4 lanes of traffic on 6th Street, but there's also on-street parking on 6th Street. So you have an additional amount of right-of-way. Again, the issue with site triangles is we don't want to block sight lines as we're trying to pull out of the traffic. This is taken from if you were a car sitting at that intersection. As you can see, depending on how good your eyesight is, you can see as far as you'd want to see. Now, there's a hill, I don't know, 1,000 or 1,500 feet away, but there is absolutely no safety issue whatsoever present with this site triangle. I believe Mr. Winger will confirm that. We think that the variance is appropriate, and what we have is simply a conflict between what we desire downtown, that being, as Ms. Hammond said, buildings pushed to the right-of-way, and what we desire out in the suburbs. Here, we're required to be up to the right-of-way. If we decided to grant this body the variance, or excuse me, the site triangle, we'd have to go to the Board of Adjustment to get a variance from the zoning code. Then we'd have to go back to UDC because the design approval doesn't anticipate a pushback, because I don't think the UDC would approve it. So, there is no safety issue. We would ask for your support on the variance as well as on the plat. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Commissioners? We have 2 people signed up. Lee Peoples.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, Lee Peoples, 824 Northwest 7th Street. You were copied on an email yesterday from Friends of Sosa requesting that Public Works turn over any traffic studies that have been done. If a study has not been done, the email requested that one be conducted and any decision on this plat be delayed until we have the results of that study. This seems to be the only prudent course of action given the concerns of the 27 businesses and residences that have objected to this development and the site triangle because of safety concerns about this intersection at 6th and Francis. The Cottage District where this intersection is located is not like downtown. it is a neighborhood with single-family homes. There are children that live adjacent to this block. 6th Street is an arterial street. Cars traveling east on 6th Street pick up speed going downhill from Lee and Chartel and frequently exceed the posted speed limit. The street handles a high volume of traffic. According to the ACOG website, and this is from 2013, and I think this number has only increased with development downtown, but back in 2013 we had 5,000 cars per day going down this street. In contrast, a street just a few blocks away, Dewey, between 6th and 8th Street, had only 300 cars per day. Now, when we met 2 weeks ago, Curtis Higgins from the Public Works Department stated that, quote, because of the downtown district, it would be acceptable to vary the site triangle. He also said, quote, I believe traffic would agree with us. He didn't say I know or I have proof or I believe traffic would, he said I believe traffic would agree with us. A property's location in the downtown district has no bearing on whether or not it's safe to vary the site triangle. The statement of the Public Works representative does not comply with the strict requirement of the zoning code, section 59-12-300, that says that you can only grant an exception from this site triangle requirement when the Public Works director has, quote, determined the encroachment will not create a traffic hazard. We have asked for evidence of that. We have not received any, and I would ask for you to continue this matter or to deny it until we receive that information. There is no indication that Mr. Higgins, who spoke on October 8th, viewed the site plan, no indication that he understood the size of the buildings. By the way, they're 75 feet tall. There is no indication that he looked at the rendering showing the location of the buildings. There's no indication that he visited the site and actually saw for himself. The published standards on traffic impact analysis state that the city may require a developer to prepare one for any reason. Some examples of when it is appropriate are the presence or existing of a potential safety problem. Well, in our protest letter signed by 27 neighbors and businesses, we discussed this safety problem. Another example of when one may be required is when there is a need for an analysis based on access or operational issues. This plat was flagged for a variance because of a private drive. We know there are issues about concerns over emergency vehicle access and turnaround, concerns over trash pickup, concerns over visitor parking on 6th. I believe you should not grant an exception without first requiring a traffic impact analysis. There will be accidents at 6th and Francis. People will be injured, and because the developer and the city are on notice about this, they have failed to adequately study it, they have failed to take action, the city and the developer could likely be held liable for injuries that occur at these accidents. You have discretion to require this analysis, and I would urge you to require one. Now I'd like to address the requirement very briefly for the variance. As you know, there are 4 elements in Oklahoma law to receive a variance. The burden of proof is on the applicant to prove each individual element before you grant a variance. The first element is that granting a variance should not be detrimental to the public health, safety, general welfare, or injurious to other properties. We have serious concerns about safety, as I have mentioned, based on the letter with 27 neighbors signing it, and we have no solid proof that varying the requirement would be safe. We need the study. Secondly, the variance request must be based on something unique to the property and not something generally applicable to other properties. There's nothing unique about this property. The developer created the condition requiring this variance by citing the project with 0 lot lines and placing 45-foot townhomes at the corner of a very busy intersection. This same condition would exist at any corner on 6th Street. A similar development was considered by the Oklahoma Supreme Court in matter of Schrader. They found there that the only evidence of peculiarity was the fact that the residence was on a corner lot, and they said that was not enough to grant a variance. The third element of a variance, the owner must suffer undue hardship, as distinguished from mere inconvenience, because of the physical surroundings, the shape, or the conditions of the property. Complying with the site triangle requirement does not impose an undue hardship. Any hardship caused by the site triangle requirement was self-imposed by the developer by their placement of those townhomes too close to 6th Street. Oklahoma law has been very well established on this for decades. A hardship created by an owner does not constitute a valid basis for a variance. I can cite you cases going back decades on this point. Now, the developer may claim a hardship in lost profits from not being able to construct that single townhome that is blocking the site triangle. You should not favor a developer's profit motive over concerns over public safety. The Oklahoma Supreme Court has held that monetary benefits are not sufficient grounds to grant a variance. And finally, granting a variance must not nullify the provisions of the planning or zoning code or comprehensive plan. The purpose of that subdivision regulation is for safety, and we believe it would be unsafe to give them a variance. And I'd also briefly like to touch upon, before I conclude, reasons why the plat is not in compliance, because I know the variance is up for a vote and also the plat itself is up for a vote today. So I will briefly conclude with some comments on why the plat is not in compliance. Section 1.3.3 of the subdivision regulations state that their purpose is to provide adequate light, air, and privacy to surrounding homeowners, to prevent the overcrowding of land, and to provide open space separation between buildings. This plat crams 14 lots more tightly on land than we find anywhere else in the surrounding neighborhood. You can see there on the screen in front of you how those lots are crammed on there, and compare it with what you see just on the one block to the north, where the lots, there is ample space between the homes. As the subdivision regulations would require, there is adequate light and air and privacy and open space. But the plat before you today does not do this. In our protest letter, we provided you with a survey of all the lots in the district. The survey measures the square footage of residences as a percentage of lot size. The average residential square footage is only 34% of lot size throughout the cottage district. The average square footage of this proposed development is 135% of lot size taken up by a building. This mathematically proves that the proposed plat does not comply with the subdivision regulations. It does not prevent overcrowding, it does not provide open space, it does not provide adequate light and air. Another point, value. Section 1.3.7 of the subdivision regulations state that another purpose is to protect the value of land and buildings and minimize conflicts. You have in our original protest letter a number of comments from neighbors expressing concern over the negative impact this plat will have on the value of their properties. The letters also highlight the conflict between this plat and the rest of the cottage district. And finally, character. Another stated purpose of the subdivision regulation, 1.3.4, is to protect the character of all parts of the city. A key character element of the cottage district, as stated in the downtown development framework, low-density residential building pattern. That is not what we have with this plat, and I would urge you to reject the plat and not grant the variance. Thank you.
Any questions of Mr. Peoples? Commissioners?
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bleakley?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Bill Bleakley, currently residing at 3200 Harvey Parkway, but soon to be moving into 607 Northwest 7th. The Cottage District is a low-density residential area. This property in question is within the Cottage District boundaries that are defined by code and have special qualities to them. I'm kind of disappointed in the current memo from Ms. Hammondtree regarding comparable projects, which she describes as the Edge, the big apartment complexes going in Deep Deuce. These are in downtown areas of dense development. On virtually every corner there is a stoplight and slow traffic. This is a residential area, and by the time people hit Walker and Chartel coming down 6th Street, they're hell-bent to get out of town. It is a very challenging street. The density at that corner with a church with services on Sundays, and if my prophecy is that all of these units that are facing 6th Street will park at least one of their vehicles on 6th Street a lot of the time, really physically impairs the sight of people pulling up to the stop sign, which is fairly far back on the church side. And then you think about trash day, where you've got 7 units, and if they each have 2 big blues, there's 14 trash containers that would be lined up along 6th Street there. It is going to be very perilous to the neighborhood. We have families with children residing right across the alley. 2 blocks from this corner is Red Andrews Park, which is currently heavily utilized by youth groups. The neighborhood is working with others to enhance this neighborhood park to make it even more family-friendly. We have lots of traffic situations that are really going to impact upon this. There are acquisitions of property just 6th, 7th, 8th Street, between 8th and 9th, large acquisitions of apartments being made which could well be proposed as developments like this. If this goes forward and sets a precedent for this type of thing, the future of Cottage District is greatly impaired as a creative design district of residential. So I urge you to deny the request for the variances. Thank you.
Any questions of Mr. Bleakley, Commissioners? Eric, I'd like to have you come up.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Eric Winger, Public Works Director for Oklahoma City.
Well, one issue you can address is something that Mr. Peoples brought up, which is your authority to grant variances in the downtown design district as one part of it, and then whatever else you might want to say in response to what you've heard.
Sure. So I think one of the things that I just want to make clear and to back up some of what Aubrey Hammondtree had just mentioned to you is that there's actually a couple of different codes that are in play and two different things that we really need to consider as a part of the sections that are reviewed from a planning perspective and from a public works perspective. So you do have some city code that applies, but you also have the city's subdivision regulations that apply as well. So when you're asking from a public works or from an engineering perspective, we're looking at this from an engineered decision process and using the subdivision regulations for that. And there's actually two sections in that division that apply. We've noted the site triangle requirements, and from a public works perspective, this has to do with the site and how the buildings are placed on the site. It has less to do with the engineering of the traffic and of the flow of traffic around the site. We are very concerned, though, with the decision site distance, and that is a calculation that we have actually already performed on this site through staff analysis. And so to make a couple of corrections, 6th Street is not an arterial street. It's actually a connector collector. So it has a less classification than an arterial. It does have 4,900 average cars per day that travel on that. Francis is actually considered a local or a neighborhood street. We don't have a count on that because the count is so low. So it would be like a traditional neighborhood type street. But when you look at the engineered analysis, the site triangle distances of 25 feet, again, are used for right-of-way determinations. When we do the site decision analysis, a measure of 10 feet is used from the back of curb from each part of the intersection. From the photos that were shown, and we can put those back up, the requirement for a 30-mile-an-hour street, which is Northwest 6th Street, has a minimum of 315 feet required in each direction. When you look to the east, we have over 1,000 feet. When we look to the west, we easily clear the 300 feet as well. So based on our determination, on our analysis of the site from Public Works and Public Works staff, we're not seeing anything that would not allow this to move forward from either a traffic or a safety issue.
Any other questions of Eric? Thank you.
You're welcome.
David, anything more?
The only thing I would say is on the issue of whether or not this is a self-imposed hardship, I would say it's not. The hardship is imposed because we're complying with the zoning code. We didn't impose this upon ourselves. By meeting the zoning code, that hardship is imposed. On the issue of us parking on 6th Street, it's worth noting that all of these units are rear loading, all of which have a two-car garage. So I don't think that's an issue either. We would ask for your approval on both the variance and the plat. Thank you.
Any other discussion, Commissioners? Motion?
I'm going to move for approval. Do I need to move the variance first?
Variance first.
Variance.
We have a motion and a second to approve the variance. Cast your votes. Bob, you want to vote no? Okay. And then the item?
I'm going to move approval of the item.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the item. Cast your votes. It's approved.
Item 17 is SPUD 847 to rezone 7200 South Donna Lane from AA to SPUD 847.
I'm Randy Hill with E.D. Hill, representing the client, Samuel Chestnut, who's here in the chambers today, also with other members of the church that's going to go there. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. We agree with the technical evaluations.
Commissioner, no one has signed up.
Make a motion to approve.
We have a motion and a second to approve item 17. Cast your votes. That's approved.
Thank you.
Item 18 is CE 921 to close a portion of North St. Charles Street.
I'm Randy Hill with E.D. Hill, represent Zortman Enterprises, and also Terry Langston on this matter.
As perhaps the only consumer on the horseshoe of Skate Galaxy's services, having a teenage daughter who goes here to skate with her friends. As I recall this stretch, it really is already being used more or less as a driveway for this business. Are you going to actually close it off? There's something in here about putting up a crash gate. Do the people who live down on 34th Street actually use this? I mean, I can't imagine they would, but I've never seen anybody except the patrons of the business use it, but it looks like it's open.
Well, and that's pretty much but it will be when we're through with this application. It'll be just utilized as part of the driveway, and they will have a special box that'll have a gate at the south end that the fire department can access. That if and I've met with the fire marshal on that, and they're in agreement with that.
The people on St. Charles, that's St. Charles that runs north and south there, right?
Yeah.
Randy? And so they take access off of 36 into their lots, right?
Yes, sir.
And do they also, like for this one particular house, I guess, could have an access out into that drive? Is it blocked, or is it blocked from him? To the east, excuse me.
To 34th Street, you mean? That's their access?
Oh, I get it. Yeah, I think I know.
What happens now is that it's almost like a dangerous situation because people try to go either way on it.
Mm-hmm.
And in addition to that, it's become an area where the loitering at night and that sort of thing, and so that's why we've asked for it to be closed.
What are the structures, Randy, in the middle of, sort of halfway between 34th and 36th Street on the west side of the alley? They're like...
Those are apartments.
And where do they gain access?
They have their access out to MacArthur and also to 34th Street.
Okay, so they're not going to be landlocked by what you're doing?
They will not be landlocked.
Okay.
Okay.
Nobody would use this as an access.
Right.
I mean, it's not set up for
Okay.
that.
The only person
Is there-
signed up is the co-applicant, so I'm assuming that, Randy, you're speaking for Mr. Langston.
Right.
Nick?
Well, my question, Mr. Chairman, is it looks like we're closing part of this street. Traffic makes a comment on page 3 of our staff report that says there's insufficient information at this time in which Traffic Management Division can adequately assess traffic impact. That leaves me a little cold, but my question is, what is St. Clair used for to the south of this closing? Who uses that?
The apartments.
Okay, so that is an access to the apartments, and then none of the apartments then goes out on St. Clair and goes north to 36?
Well, they could go either direction, I guess, and that's what they're doing today. Is they're kind of trying to use it as a street that goes both ways, but it's only one lane wide. And so that's why it's become a dangerous situation. So their access, they'll still have the same access they do, there will not be access out to 36.
They just can't go north.
Right.
So if they want to go east on 36, they have to go back out to MacArthur and
Go out to
around.
MacArthur, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any other discussion?
I'm going to move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve item 18. Cast your votes.
Excuse me, can we restate the motion?
It's approval of
move
item
for
16.
Approval.
18. We're clear? Lee? Yes. Okay, cast your votes. And it's approved.
Thank you very much.
Item 19 was continued. Item 20 is CE 922 to close a 20-foot east-west alley located at 1113 North Classen.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Dennis Box. This item was continued 2 weeks ago. I called Mr. Shipman, and he was agreeable to continuance, and he agreed we'd come out and talk to him. Mr. Gibson in my office went out and talked to him. We were unsuccessful in resolving our closing. What I told Mr. Shipman was we would close an attachment 2 that Cindy's putting up is probably a good example. My clients are out of New York, and they have purchased all the property between Western and Classen in this entire block except for the best exterminators. You'll see another application on your next docket with the same group because they did the same thing to the north of 10th Street. And their purpose in buying these properties, if you all are familiar with the properties, at the southeast corner of 10th and Western, it was a old convenience store with gas pumps, and there are several old buildings on the site that we'll go through the pics with. But the good news is this group has determined that they think both this block and the block to the north are going to be ripe for development, and they're trying to work with developers to come in. Number one, I want to amend the application in front of you. The map that Cindy has put up here, we do not want to close the 20-foot alley that sits adjacent to the best exterminators. They use that for their access. We think they have the right to continue to use that for their access. What we're trying to do now is take the rest of the block and get it ripe and ready for future development, which will entail tearing buildings down, moving utilities, and those kinds of things. So if we go through the pics real quick, this is an example of the location. And as you can see, right at the address, 1015, that's where the exterminator business is and where it will remain. The previous picture showed you what we propose is taking from the west side of their property line back to the west. So we'll leave the 20-foot alley open to Classen. These are an example of some of the buildings that have outlived their usefulness. We don't think we have a problem with a demolition permit unless Aubrey tells me otherwise. Here's another example. So what you see is property that the buildings are tired, old, most abandoned, and our goal is to take this property and the property to the north and bring it into an area where we can have full development and go from there. I don't know if the protester is here, but I know he is protesting even our closing west of his property. So that was the latest thing he left with us.
He is here, so we will hear from him.
Very good.
Any questions of Dennis before we? Okay, Mr. Shipman. If you'd give us your name and address for the record, please.
Robert L. Shipman. My office is at 1015 Classen Boulevard. I reside at 13328 Southeast 134th, Oklahoma City.
Thank you.
Thank you for hearing my protest on this. My office has been there for close to 50 years. My family's made a living there for close to 50 years. I'm really not opposed to the west end of that alley being closed. I understand about development. Oklahoma City's been good to my family. I like to see the taxes come into this town. But I'm real concerned about, this is a big, big outfit out of New York. They're buying everything in that community. And what I'm worried about is once they get that end of the alley closed, they'll come in and start wanting the other end. There's no access to my property on either side to get into it without this alley. We use it every day. We have big trucks come in there to make delivery. If the alley's closed, the only way to get out of there with the big trucks is to back out into Classen Boulevard. You all know how busy Classen is. There's no place in front of my building to turn around there. There's only room there for 3 cars. Years ago, Oklahoma City came in and took a big portion of my parking in front of the building when they widened Classen Boulevard. I didn't object to that. But I do object to this, and that for one reason. This big outfit out of New York has attorneys down here. I'm just a layman, but I still make a living there. I'll be 74 in 3 days. I am too old to go back into debt for another property. I don't want to close my business. It's been a part of downtown Oklahoma City for years. If you look at my package, you'll see that that building was chosen because it's in the center of where we work. I'm able to get to any part of that area within 30 minutes. That way I can keep my prices down. If I'm made to move, I'll have no choice but to raise my prices to my customers. And that's really about all I have to say on this matter.
I'm sorry.
Let me ask a couple of questions, then we'll go to Janice and Nick. Do I understand that if the east half of the alley is left open just to the west end of your property, which is what I understand Mr. Box to propose, does that allow you to adequately serve your business? You said something about turning around.
We have 2 vehicles that pull trailers. Once they get in there, they can get in, but they can't turn around to get back out.
Okay, that was what I wanted to know.
I will say this. We can change some things. Most of our trucks are just pickups that come in with no trailers. I'm willing to work with these people, but I don't want that alley on the east end closed at all. If it's closed, there'll be no way for me to get in and out of there. Period.
I don't think we'd ever allow that east part of the alley to be closed so that you could not do business. I mean, I don't think that would happen today, and I don't think it'll happen in the future.
Now, let me say one more thing. Waste Management comes in there. You know what kind of trucks they drive. He won't be able to turn around in there. He'll have to back out into Classen Boulevard. The police come in there. They're in there all the time. Y'all probably know the area. There's a lot of drugs in the area. They use that alley to hide in there and watch all this stuff, a lot. The fire department uses it at times, but we use it every day, all day long, in and out. We exit off of Western into the back of my building with these trailers, and we pull up and back up into my garage. And that's where we keep our supplies. We buy a lot of material out of the East Coast, and they ship it here to Oklahoma or somewhere, and they put it on big trucks, and they bring it to us. And they'll come in off of Western or Classen and exit the opposite direction because they can't back out onto Classen. There's just no room there.
Okay. Janice, you had something?
It's really just an attempt to clarify. You started off by saying you didn't really have a problem with them closing off the west end. But then some of the comments that you've made seem to indicate that you do have a problem with it. If it's a problem that's just because it's a big outfit out of New York, that's one thing. If it's a problem because your vehicles need access to both ends of the alley, that's a different thing.
I sent you a packet of pictures
Good.
with a couple of my trucks there with their trailers. And you can see there's no way that you can pull in there off of Classen and back out or turn around there. There's just not enough room. So they go on through the alley out to Western. Or they'll come in on Western and back up to the building and then leave out on Classen. Like I say, I can change that some by not bringing those trailers in there. Move some of my merchandise to another location. I have other locations that I could do that on. But I don't really want to. But even if that was done, what am I going to do about waste management and these other big trucks that come in there?
And I'm curious about that point as well, about the issue of waste management, how that would work. Do we know if we have anybody here that can talk to us about that?
Nick, you had something while we're...
I did, and Janice beat me to it. I had the same question she had.
Well, I have a question. How many feet is it from your building to their property line across the alley? How much space is there between your building and that property line that they will develop?
There's approximately 26 feet.
26 feet? Doesn't that leave you enough for a turnaround to do a back and U-turn to get back out?
No, not with a trailer or a big truck.
Now I'm becoming a little confused. I'm looking at the diagram on the screen, and I'm seeing a 20-foot alley, and so you're saying there's 26 feet, so your building is within 6 feet of the alley?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you don't really have a place to park on your property unless you park in the alley?
Or behind it, or in front.
Well, yeah, we saw the 2 or 3 parking places on Classen, but your building is within 6 feet of the alley.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
My trucks don't stay there. I have 2 trucks that stay there, and they're parked in the garage back behind it. And the service trucks are in and out of there all day long. They don't stay there, not all of them.
They just come, load stuff up, and leave.
Right.
And that includes the trucks with trailers? Your 2 trucks that have trailers, they're in and out all day as well?
They're not there every day. They're not there every day. The trailers are not there every day. But they come in about twice a week.
And do I see from this aerial that because of the median on Classen, trucks exiting from the alley onto Classen have to turn south? Is that right? There's no way to turn...
I'm sorry, I'm a little hard here.
There's no way to turn north out of the alley onto Classen. Trucks that come out of the alley onto Classen have to turn south. Is that right?
Well, they got to turn west. South. Yeah, south.
There's a concrete median there.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a concrete median, separate drive. Most of them come in off of Classen, my deliveries that they come in. My service trucks usually come in off of Western and back up to the building.
But the trucks that make deliveries then, if they come in on Classen, if trucks that make deliveries to you come in on Classen, they're then heading west on the alley, so they have to go out to Western to exit.
Yes, sir.
Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So is there not anybody here from sanitation services that can talk to us about getting trucks in and out? No? Okay.
You may get to the microphone, please, Dennis.
If we could, this gives you a pretty good indication of the access off Classen and the depth to which his property goes. As you can tell, you can see where the cars come in, go west, and then go to the north. Let's see if there's any other good pictures, Cindy. Okay, let's go to the end. Is there a couple at the end, Keith? Okay. I just want to make sure you all understand. I know Mr. Bright has driven it, but my clients did attempt to purchase the property, and rightfully so, he said no, he wasn't interested. So my clients have said, then let's work with him. Let's take the alley back to the west, let him continue to have his access, and we'll work around it. This is a view where you're looking to the west. His property is where the address is, and you can get a pretty good indication that it comes in off Classen, and the first building is his office, and then the second is a little carport, and then in the last building, a little garage. Yes. Yeah. So.
Okay, to clarify that for me, Dennis, how far back to the west is, or maybe Mr. Shipman can tell me, but is the property line
That property.
at where the trees are after the...
Can you see those big trees behind
Yes.
the building?
That's the property line.
Yeah. That lot is about 127 foot deep and 37 and a half foot.
Okay, so now I'm looking at your property and the alley, and I guess that third structure to the west is a carport, a little white roof thing,
Yes.
right there. If I came off of Classen, why couldn't I back a trailer in there and turn around?
These trailers are 14 foot and 16 foot.
Well, but you've got a 20-foot alley, and it looks like a good distance there. I don't know. But I see a lot of vacant space in front of that carport. I think I could turn a trailer around there. I'm not suggesting I could turn a semi around there.
Look, I've got a concern here. I mean, look, I understand the need for development, and I'm not, but we're really trying to work this, not in favor of a guy that's operated a business here for 50 years, and I appreciate the development, but we're engineering, and I'm not an engineer. I'm not inclined to approve this application. I'm not a guy that needs to be figuring this out. I mean, I think it's too much of a hardship on the business that's already there. And
he ought to be able to stay there.
And they ought to be able to stay there.
I just asked Mr. Shipman if he was okay with our taking his property line and closing it to the west, and his answer was he's all right with that as long as we don't come back and try to buy his business, which is fine with us. We're not going to buy his business.
No, that's not what I said. Okay. What I said was...
Yeah, you're confusing us, quite frankly, Mr. Shipman.
Yeah. Okay. Clarification. As long as we don't come back and try to close it.
Dennis,
I can't. Yeah. What Ms. Shipman just said is he's okay with closing the west end as long as we agree not to come back and try to close the east end. Well, it would be a futile effort to close the east end because he's got the right to use his property. Been there 50 years, now to continue.
That's exactly right.
Well, he started with... The truth is, there's a little more to it than that. He's got a right, as a member of the public, to use the alley, period. Not just the part of it that abuts his property. If the alley's there and it's in use by a member of the public, it ought not be closed, period.
He started with the comment that we just heard, which is I'm happy to let him close the west half of the alley, but then everything he has said since about how his business needs to be run.
And that was the question Janice asked and that I was going to ask, and it looks like we've gone 360 now.
I'm confused.
Well, I think that this is a premature application because this is a speculative land development. No plan, they'll flip it or do something like that. And until that plan comes in there, leave the alley open, and when you come in with a development plan, figure out some way to accommodate his business. Don't shut it down now because he's got to turn around with a truck and a trailer. And I agree with Nick, that white building, it seems to me that adds another 10 or 15 feet for turnaround, but if you say that will be impossible or difficult, leave it alone. Let you run your business, and then when the developer comes back in with some plan, because right now this is speculative. Let's just close it off and let's have the whole thing available for whatever. Well, there may be a development that has an access for your business that goes west, and they may leave it open. I don't know. I think it's too premature to affect your business.
Second.
Well, I mean, well, are we
This is
going to
about
motion
this.
to, are you
Deny.
trying to ask, we're going to motion to deny this, or should we ask if they'd like to continue this indefinitely or something like that?
Yeah, I say we deny it and move it off our docket, and if it wants to come back at a later time, let's do that.
Is that a
That's my
motion?
motions.
Oh, second.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to deny item 20. Cast your votes. It is denied.
Thank you for your time.
Luke, you didn't vote? Okay, good, thank you.
Item 21 was continued. Item 22 is PUD 1600 to rezone 16301 South Penn from AA to PUD 1600.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, my name is P.B. Oldham III. I go by Paul. I'm the developer here, and I own the company that's the applicant. I reside and office in Oklahoma City. About a year ago, a little over a year ago actually, I was before this astute body, and did not take the hint to continue this case. And I went ahead and was unanimously voted down. The only time that I have been before the commission in 40 years that I have never won. So, but I lost. I went to council, and we made a deal with council they approved the residential portion. The reason I was denied was the reason we're here is for this commercial piece. And so, before you is a PUD on the commercial piece of property. So I was I'm sorry to waste everybody's time that first meeting. But anyway, happy to answer questions, and my engineer, Tim Johnson, will address, and I will, some of the technical evaluations. Yeah.
One big question I have, Paul, is the staff report for uses, it gives us some uses, and they are what they are. But then there's a comment that says the following use units shall also be permitted without further approval. Multifamily residential.
Yes.
Okay. When I see that, I look at this block here and I say that's a pretty good piece of dirt. I can forget all this commercial stuff, and I can pack 32 apartment units per acre on that, have a multifamily development. I know that's not your intent, but there's no limitation on the multifamily in this. So can you help me with that?
Yeah, I think we can. I think we can work that out for sure.
Because the way it looks right now, you could make the whole thing the densest apartments that could be built.
Yeah, I don't know what that is. Is it 32? I was not aware of that, but I think. Oh, there he is. Okay, I'll let Tim talk.
Tim Johnson with Johnson Associates. We've kind of already talked a little bit about the case. I think starting from the bottom and going back up with regard to the traffic study, we did submit several pages of traffic information to the planning staff. I did talk to Randy Ants about the fact that we do exceed the threshold of the traffic impact study, and we talked about the upcoming impact fees and those type of things, and knowing that this development is not going to be developed as commercial for many years. And the residential that's around us, as you know, has just now started. And in our traffic counts that we took and added up and submitted to the staff to show that, yes, we do exceed the threshold, which is 100 trips per day during peak hour. Well, that's exceeded by the 2 residential additions as well. And as you know, the residential addition on the east side of Pennsylvania didn't require a traffic impact study. The R1 that was approved on the west side didn't require a traffic impact study, and that's why Mr. Odom didn't feel it was necessary or warranted at this point, because there's just not the traffic load there. I mean, we could say if it's fully developed, yep, it's going to need some improvements. We don't know what those improvements are at this point. Obviously, both 164th Street and Pennsylvania are 2-lane rural sections. So That's why the traffic information that we provided the staff was what we submitted and asked for a variance, or a waiver. Yes, sir.
Excuse me, let me ask you a question. There are two-lane rural roads right now. What happens if we get some heavy development down there? People aren't going to be able to move around, period, I assume.
Well, I mean, the question is, how many years is that going to take to do that? You know, it's
Nothing that you said about that makes me feel any better. It's like it's going to be years before this property is commercially developed. Why are we zoning it now? Why are we trying to make decisions in the absence of facts about whether or not traffic improvements need to be made? Nothing about that makes me feel any better about this application.
Well, we're not absent the facts. We provided the facts. The facts are, if it's fully developed down there, there needs to be some improvements. The question is, who's going to do them and when? Paul hasn't even submitted a preliminary plat or anything on the residential. You do have a preliminary plat on the east side with a development just now beginning. I don't even think there's one rooftop in there. But that said, if they do all the houses that they propose, that's 400 trips. We do all the houses that were proposed in the R1, that's another 400 trips. I'm sorry, that's another 100 and some odd trips, and then the commercial is another 400 trips. So it's still not a huge impact to a very rural section that has no traffic on it today. The two-lane roads could handle it, and a three-way stop could handle it.
And the zoning is there for the residential, basically.
That's right.
So that's present now.
So it's just one of those, we're on the bubble with regard to that. A traffic impact study is not going to show you the staff any more than I've already told you, in essence. And there's still going to be a condition of when will the improvements be required? Well, they won't be required until some rooftops are built. There won't be any commercial developed until some rooftops are built.
I guess the only thing I would say, and I'm not opposed to not doing the traffic study for the reasons we've heard, is that I certainly hope we don't have down in this area what has happened in Ward 8, which is all of the development happens, and then 15 years later, maybe there's some money in a bond issue to make some improvements, so we go back and do, for a second time, at a much greater cost, what could have and should have been done in the first place. So that's maybe an overarching comment directed to the city as a whole, starting with the council and the manager's office. We need to get ahead of some of this stuff. It affects quality of life.
I'll move on to the other TEs. We did evaluate the staff's comments, and item number 2 is the staff's standard comment about an 8-foot-high sign. We are proposing a single 30-foot-high sign that would be a monument sign, and included in your packet is illustrations of signs that Mr. Odom has done on his other commercial developments. The Châtenay sign is in there. The electronic message display signage on item number 3, I know that's something that the Planning Commission hates. We did put the language in the PUD that would only be considered as part of the site plan approval. If it was an appropriate use at that time, it would be permitted. Otherwise, it would not be permitted by right. We're okay.
So you're saying you want us to delete TE3? Is that, what am I hearing you say?
No, what our PUD does say is that the EMDs are only permitted to be approved under a site plan approved process. If you eliminate altogether, we couldn't come as part of the site plan and ask for that. We'd like the ability to have the right to have it approved as part of the site plan like we've done in several recent PUDs. And if it's an appropriate use at that time for an EMD sign somewhere in the center, then it could be approved as part of the site plan. That it won't be allowed by right, and the language is in the PUD that way.
So you would want the TE to say something like EMD display signage will be or may be considered at the site.
Right. And I think the language we use is may be considered at the site plan approval process.
And why wouldn't it be appropriate for that same type of language, since we're so prospective on this, to apply to the previous TE on the signage? rather than approve 30-foot signage, because we don't know what we're building.
We could consider that.
I'm guessing there's no sign inside out there.
Yeah, there's
I don't
still,
know the area that well.
there's still an old bummer shave sign on a fence post.
I mean, other than Paul's sign, that was moved probably, so I'm not inclined to approve a 30-foot sign at that area, right there, right now. I mean, we got a chance to preserve an intersection here, potentially. And I'm not saying 30 feet is, I would never consider it, but for now, I sure wouldn't.
And we could certainly amend the PUD to allow the signage to be approved as part of the site-specific plan approval.
Yeah.
And say that it shall
So
not exceed 30 feet.
Essentially, we're amending TEs 2 and 3 then, as we've just talked.
I'd be okay with that. Would you be okay?
Paul nodded yes.
You okay with that?
I tell you, I'll just say to you guys, I don't like that idea at all. We're just kicking the can down the road and making it possible that we're going to have watered down our requirements on signage to the point that at some point in the future, they're going to come in with a site plan approval and get EMD signage and 30-foot tall signs approved like, oh, well, it says right here we can do this. I don't like that idea at all. Not in favor of a 30-foot sign, not in favor of any EMD. Don't have a problem saying so right now today.
Now, Nick reminded me of what we did several years ago when I sent everybody the editorial out of the Los Angeles Times about billboards and EMD signs and what the Los Angeles Planning Commission had done. Like, no. We did the same thing, and the same thing happened to us. You know, they've said, the council, well, let's work on this, and you can have level 1, level 2, level 3, which is all crazy. This is goat pasture. This is just, you know, there's nothing there, and why even start the process with this application saying that, oh, well, at some point we will or may do this, and just say no. I mean, that's, I won't support it if you don't, I mean, there's no reason for it.
Well, the property owner has a right to ask for that in his PUD, and that's what he's asking for.
Yeah. But,
and you have a site plan approval process that allows you the ability to look and see what the sign package would look like. And it may be at some point in time, 20 years from now, maybe it's an appropriate sign.
But it's a pre-approved look at site plan EMD sign because it's already in the picture. If we have this application, which is, you know, a square, we don't know what you're going to do there. It may be residential, it may be commercial, it may be something. But if you want that approval, well then, you know, do the TEs as they are right now, and at some point in time, as you said, this is going to be years from now before anything's done. Let's deal with the picture that we have in front of us today, and that is there's no sign competition, there's no reason to have any flashing signs anywhere in the whole neighborhood, so comply with the TEs, and then you have site plans that go on forever and ever, and at some point in time, you can always come back in because the makeup of the commission may be different. You know, you can always come back in and say, we love EMD signs. You know,
We'd either have to come
right now, I don't.
The Board of Adjustment or rezone the property, and that's what we don't want to do.
Well, I mean, that's what I have to say about this.
Well, I understand. You know, it's your prerogative, and I understand it. And I think, and Mr. Odom would agree, you know, if we put the language in there, allow signs to be reviewed, both EMD and monument signs at the time the site plan's approval, we're agreeable to that. On 5, we're agreeable to those setbacks with the exception of the convenience sales and personal services. That's pretty restrictive to pull that use out at that spacing of 150 feet from the property line. I mean, that could be a jeweler's store.
From residentially zoned, that's a problem, because you probably put that on the court.
150 feet from, let's say, our north property line, if we go 150 feet, that's a lot of building before we can put personal sales. I agree with the other 4 as being...
Oh, okay.
It's just that one use unit. It would eliminate the potential of having retail within, you know, at the end of a building cap.
Yeah, there are several uses that are in with convenience sales that are fairly benign.
So I think maybe we could just say a convenience store and not the whole use.
And we're agreeable to that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a broad
Yeah.
use unit.
Okay, so that's amended to convenience store.
Yes, we'll
All
agree to that. Item 6, it mandates a vehicular access to the commercial. We'd like to not be mandated that. We're okay with trying to provide pedestrian access, and a vehicular access may be appropriate, but we haven't laid out the subdivision yet. And I can name off many commercial developments that run into residential developments that are not good, and we don't want to be mandated to have to do that and then have to come back and close that off later on. I mean, I've been before this body closing streets that go up to commercial uses for that very reason. And so we'd like to not require the vehicular in item 6. We've already worn out number 7.
Aubrey, do you have a comment on 6? Or JJ, either one?
Well, I might make a comment on broader scale. Comprehensive plan recommends that we tie residential areas to commercial areas and that we look for connectivity and opportunities for people to go from the neighborhood into a commercial district without having to travel out onto an arterial and get there the other way. So we encourage developments that are done by the same developer to lay everything out and show how that connectivity can be achieved. The fact that you're doing this in 2 separate pieces, we have no idea how your subdivision is going to be laid out, and making these decisions now prevents us from being able to consider that in the future. So that's why we've written this in there, that you would look and explore the options of tying those 2 developments together.
Well, it doesn't give me the option. It says that I shall provide. We'd be happy to consider it. And, I mean, that's, Mr. Odom would like the opportunity to make that work if it's a function of the subdivision and the commercial working out together. And we've done that on some of his other projects before, but not mandated. Change it to encouraged pedestrian or vehicular access.
I think we ought to leave it with what we got in the plan. I mean, if we don't say we want this, we won't get it. I mean, I'm okay. Look, I'm not quite on the side of Bob and Janice on the sign, sorry. But I think this one is one that if we don't make it a requirement, we won't get it. No offense, Paul. I know you'll try, but I want you to design with that in mind, because that's one of the things that we like to encourage. That's my view. I know Janice and Bob
We'll agree to that.
Well, there were a couple of...
Okay, they'll agree.
We'll agree to leave that in.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good.
All right, any other discussion? No one has signed up, Commissioners.
Did we decide about the multifamily residential versus the...
No, that's open.
Paul's going to address that. Well, while they're talking, the purpose of that question was, with this amount of acreage, it looks like you're looking at, if it were all developed, R4, you're having 400 or 500 apartment units there.
Yeah, no, we'd agree to not to exceed 25 units.
See, I can live with that, 25 units on 15 acres.
And we'll add that.
And so that should be an additional TE, and that makes sense.
Is that in a TE?
No, we'll add an additional
We'll amend
TE
the document
R4.
prior to council, but we'll agree to that.
Any further discussion? If not, I'll ask for a motion which includes amending TEs 2 and 3 over Janice and Bob's objections, I think, that freestanding signs freestanding signs shall be considered at the site planning stage, and that electronic message display signage may be considered at the site planning stage, that in TE5, those line convenience sales and personal service will be altered to say convenience store. TE6 remains. And then we add a TE8, limiting the number of apartment units to 25.
Or just R4 units?
R4 units to 25, and delete TE7. Someone will take that as a motion? Any further discussion? Okay. The motion is to approve item 22 as just read. Cast your votes. And it is adopted. It passes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to comment upon the what was it, 6? There were a couple of applications that were continued today that the commercial was hermetically sealed against the residential. And this is what a comment that I would make is that I like this TE because it really is something that we worked on through committees about connectivity and about walkability and interaction between the commercial node and the residential node, and I really like that. But there are 2 other applications that just totally ignore that particular idea that we've worked on for a long, long time. And so when that comes up again, I think that we really ought to look at it, how you get from A to B into the commercial part if you live there. So
I have a hard stop I have to be out of here at about 10 minutes. I note 25 and 26 have variances in them. I don't know how controversial they are, but if we could maybe do we need me? Is my point. We may not get there.
We always.
Thank you, but I mean, you know, I'm happy to suggest maybe we take the ones with the variance ahead of this one. Just in
Is that
case.
agreeable, Commissioners? It is with me. Let's do 24 then, and then 25 and 24, but 24 and 25.
25 and 26.
25 and 26.
That too.
So I'll read 25 and 26 are for the same final plat. So it's case C6765 final plat of Northbrook Addition, Section 1. And this is located at Northwest 150th Street in Rockwell. And then item 26 is the Section 2 of the same development.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Chris Anderson with SMC Consulting Engineers representing the developer. I have read the TEs, the staff report, and agree with the TEs. We do need to talk about number 3, which has the variance, and this is number 3 for both of the plats. The plan right now is for both sections to be constructed at the same time. The reason that the developer had us put it as 2 plats in our original application is, you know, things are in flux with the oil and gas market. They're not sure how that's going to affect their housing market. These 2 plats represent 2 different product lines of houses, so that's why it came in as 2 plats. I have a letter from yesterday that you may have a copy of addressing amenities, and even in that letter the developer stated that right now they're planning on building both sections together. If both sections are built together, there's interconnection and we have 2 entrances into both subdivisions. We don't know what might happen in the next couple of months, so they had me present a plan for access to Mike Wilson of the fire department. I've got a letter that I got from him where he agreed with our plan that in case something comes up and they want to do one before the other, then we'll provide access, emergency access back to Capulet Boulevard up in Montague Section 3, which will provide the access for the fire department. Mike Wilson agreed to that. So that explains it.
That works for the fire department without redesigning the entrance or anything like that?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Would you agree that that would be a TE, that you're doing both together?
No.
No, but he just said that, you know, that was their plan, but that's why they did it this way. They don't know what's going to happen in the next couple of months.
So that's why we came up with the plan for both sections to have emergency access if something happens and they decide to do 1 before 2 or 2 before 1. There is a plan in place to meet the fire department's needs.
Okay, Commissioners, no one signed up.
I'd move variance on TE3, noting that the fire department has worked out a deal.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the variance to TE3. Cast your votes. It's approved.
And I move the final plat.
We have a motion and a second to approve item 25. Cast your votes. It's approved.
And then item 26 is Section 2 of the same development.
Again, Chris Anderson, SMC Engineering, representing the developer. Request approval of the plat.
Well, we need the variance approved here, too, I think. Do we not?
Yes.
Yeah. Move variance.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the variance to TE3. Cast your votes. That's approved.
And now I'd move approval of plat.
We have a motion and a second to approve item 26. Cast your votes. And it is approved.
Thank you very much.
Back to item 23 on the agenda, PUD 1601 to rezone 6401 State Highway 152 from PUD 1135 and PUD 1262 to PUD 1601.
Mark Grubbs, Grubbs Consulting on behalf of the applicant. What we have before you is a R2 PUD for a duplex development located on State Highway 152. We've located that as far south in the owner's property, away from the entrances of the residential and south of the commercial. There's proposed PUD 1581 that's north of you that is proposed for a C3 base. The existing zoning is C1 and O2. The duplex development will be we're proposing a masonry wall along State Highway 152. Houses will be bricked to Oklahoma City standards, and and it will be private streets and a gated development. So I apologize for the TEs because I was out of town for a long period of time and didn't have time to accept them, but we agreed to all the TEs, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of Mark, Commissioners? No one signed up.
Move approval. Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve item 23. Cast your votes, and it's approved.
Thank you.
Item 24 is C6762, the final plat of the market at Check Hall, located west of Check Hall Road and south of Interstate 40.
George Marquez with Craft & Tull, representing the developer. We concur with all TEs, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Commissioners, no one has signed up. We have a motion and a second to approve item 24. Cast your votes, and that's approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
The remaining items on the agenda have been continued. It was our last case.
Okay, Planning Commissioners.
Mr. Chairman, I have just one thing. This week, we lost one of our predecessors, Dick Coyle, who used to sit next to a tremendous person, great asset to Oklahoma City. And I'd just like to note his passing and refer to one thing in his obituary that is so Dick. It says, in lieu of flowers and donation, etc., please do an act of kindness for someone.
Well, I replaced Dick. I wound up in his seat and had a wonderful relationship with him. I knew him somewhat before that time, but I always considered him a wise counselor, someone who had good advice and good historical perspective, and a passion for Oklahoma City, and he will be missed.
I wanted to say something about that, too, today, because we have worked with Dick for so many years on so many different initiatives, and I think that he's really helped shape Oklahoma City. He is thoughtful, he was engaged, he always gave his time, and I wanted to mention that, too. Thank you for mentioning it, Nick.
And in addition to what he's known for with his development and his real estate activities, I worked with Dick on committees relating to the homeless of Oklahoma City through Catholic Charities, and he was really involved in trying to establish another day shelter for the homeless, and he was a good friend. And when I read that, it was just a sad thing, because he was a good friend, and sympathies to Nolan and his family.
Okay, Commissioners, Planning Department.
You all will receive an invitation to participate in our annual Commissioner and Committee Training Workshops. This year, it will be held on December 11th, which is a Friday, in the morning from 8:30 to 1 p.m. in the Cox Convention Center. This is the second time that we have planned a commission and committee training. The first time was for the design review committees. We're extending invitations now for Planning Commission and Board of Adjustment because over the last year we found that sharing a dialogue between all the different committees that work together and pass on recommendations to each other is a good thing. Another thing that we talked about is in light of working with the demolition criteria in downtown and the other design review districts, that Planning Commission and the design review districts do work together on similar goals and objectives, one of them being historic preservation. So we will have topical items of discussion. We will do procedural updates. It's a very informative training session. We have lots of new committee and commission members that I think would understand your role and vice versa. So you'll be receiving an invitation for that and hope that you can make it. Mm-hmm.
And the hours will be...
I think it'd be a good idea if we were to invite the members of the Traffic Commission to attend as well. I think they would find that very helpful.
Nick, you're going to say something.
Well, I was going to ask a question about the hours. I heard December 11th. I didn't know how long it was going to be.
You heard it's 8:30 to 1. So it's the morning of...
So basically, 4.5 hours is all it's going to take to get us smart.
Once a year, that's all you need, a half a day.
And we'll be fed along the way, no doubt.
We will serve breakfast and lunch.
Okay. Development services. I would hope that going back to, I guess it was maybe item 16 today, that there will be some thought to conflicting boundaries and conflicting ordinances and how those things can be addressed in the future, making life simpler for us and more understandable.
We in general understand that there are a lot of things with the subdivision regulations that can be clarified. One of the recommendations in the comprehensive plan is to go back and look at the subdivision regulations and zoning ordinances. So one of those things is that with the subdivision regulations generally applying to every subdivision across Oklahoma City, perhaps there are different standards that need to be developed for urban or downtown subdivisions versus those in the urban low-intensity areas of the city. So this case might be one of those that called to light the fact that we need to probably be a little bit more fine-tuned in our guidance to development.
And would that encompass looking at the DTD-1 zoning overlay?
Yes, we've actually been working with members of the Cottage District for several years about how that zoning district could be better organized and defined, how the guidelines could be written in a clearer way. We've gotten good feedback from them. We've initiated surveys of the residents there on what they think works and what doesn't work. We are committed to picking back up in those discussions. We have a downtown development framework plan that they support and that they like.
Good.
So I think as we move forward with making some changes to our zoning districts to bring in those guidelines from the downtown development framework, this area is going to be one of those that we look at very, very, very closely.
Because the application that was approved today, the way that the zoning regulations are in that neighborhood, right across the street, you can build a 200-foot tall building. That just, I mean, you know, in other words, whatever is happening there, we need to adjust to make sure that the rest of it works like it should work. Okay.
Anything else, Commissioners? Motion to adjourn? Oh, Municipal Councilor, I'm sorry.
I have nothing.
I bet you don't. Okay. We're adjourned. 3:30.